Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Janson X 945 Carbonic Maceration Wash Process Panama from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Manhattan, based out of Rotterdam, Netherlands, and they're the European roaster that's appeared the most on this channel, and this coffee continues our series of reviewing every single Janson coffee that Manhattan has released, with the 600 currently being my favorite of those coffees. This one is a little different from the rest, as this is their first carbonic maceration wash process Panamanian Geisha, and it's one that definitely caught my interest for that reason, as I'm curious to see how it might differ from all of the other ones that we have reviewed. This right here is day 33 of this coffee. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard Manhattan recipe, which is a 16:1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 208 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Manhattan is on the lighter side of European coffee roasters. Somebody asked me once to elaborate a little bit on that. They're not necessarily as light as some of the true Nordic light coffee roasters, or even some other coffee roasters that are in the area, thinking something like Doc, but they are still pretty light for European coffees. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 9, first impression, and yes, I always start Manhattan coffees a little early because I've kind of been told to do so beforehand, but day 9, first impression, and it had a lot of similarities to the other Janson coffees, but in a slightly more pronounced manner. So it was citric sweet, clean with a slight bit of the added floral vibrancy. It left a good first impression. It reminded me of the other Janson coffees because they have this very sort of specific, unique Janson aspect to it. I've kind of touched on that in the other videos, that it's a little different for all Panamanian Geishas in general, with something like Esmeralda, with something like Janson, with something like Alita. They all have a little bit different, unique characteristic in their own. So this one just reminded me a little bit of the other ones, but in a slightly more pronounced manner. So it was a good first impression. We continue on to day 12 and ran it through the Chemex, and it was feeling light in flavor. So it was slightly reminiscent of a lighter honeyed sweetness, but it does open up a little bit as it cools down with this lingering citric feel. Florality a little bit more pronounced, as the cup does appear to be trending up. That's not too surprising. I think something that's missed a lot of the times is one of the reasons I really like to start a cup of coffee early is because I can see just how much it's improved from when it was first tried. So when it hasn't reached its resting point yet, to see how much it does improve from that point going forward. So I was already starting to see a little bit of an incremental improvement on that day 12 mark. We continue on to day 15, as it does continue to feel a lot more like the other Jansons in terms of the citric floral flavor profile, but with a slightly more vibrant and slightly less clean base to it. So I don't want to take away from how clean this coffee is, because it's still a Panamanian Geisha. It's still pretty clean, and it definitely still scores high in that category, but it just felt like some of the other ones, especially the first Janson X that we reviewed, were hyper clean. And this one right here, while it's still super clean, not necessarily to the same extent as the other ones. It lasts, it's quite lingering. Seeing improvements, though I felt that the cup was still not quite at its best. Day 18, best day of the cup so far, as the vibrancy has translated in a much more positive manner, with a more clean and pronounced citric fruit aspect in a more sweet manner as well. Definitely a candied lemon, so this time I can kind of identify a descriptor I feel a little bit more comfortable with, and in addition to that, a sugary citrus accompanied by a wild floral aspect as well. Slight bit of herbality as it does cool in the finish. That's in line with my previous experiences with the Janson coffees, as they have this little bit of herbality to them as well. So positive on day 18. We continue to day 21, as I'm continuing to see an increase in the sweetness with time, as the cup has so many of those previous Janson characteristics and in a more increasing manner. Feels pretty sugary sweet, reminiscent of lemon marshmallow in a candied sense. That's a descriptor I liked on this day. Floral vibrancy continues to remain as well, so pretty solid. Enjoyed that day 21 mark as well. Day 24, there has not been much of a change to the coffee, as I feel like there's still a little bit more that can be unlocked from it, and I will get to that eventually, but still most distinctly citric and floral, with an ever so slight bit of grain in a more pronounced manner. So again, solid. Been pretty consistent up to this point, with just an increase in the overall vibrancy. Day 27, finally the standout day. So this is when I would say that the coffee was at its best, was this day 27, post this day 27 mark, as I was able to get a lot more of the floral white flower, a little bit of that fruity pebble aspect, and I felt like there was a little bit of potential in that, given that I reached that slight grainy quality, had plenty of that white flower base to it, as well as the citrus. So it was there. It was in a slightly more pronounced manner as well. Lemon much sweeter, florals much sweeter, and the cup really accentuates the Geisha components in a much more pronounced manner overall. Best day of this coffee so far, really liked that day. Day 30, final notes we have, another great day as it's very straightforward in the citric aspects and much more of a sweeter lemon, but also much more of the floral aspects coming through in the finish. The coffee seems to have finally reached its best, so I would say that this day 27, post day 27 mark here on day 32. Cup is really nice, so it's one of those things where I'm lucky I have a couple of cups of coffee of this one left because I will save them and see if it continues to hold on to that much more increased flavor profile. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and 2 level 5s, so let's go through those real quick. Florality, level 5. Yes, I would say at its very best, there's a little bit more of a sweeter floral component to this cup of coffee, and it's actually skewed a little bit more in the citric direction on this day as well, so we'll get to the citrus, but at its best, this coffee had some very sweet white flower components to it, and as a result, that's why it finished at the level 5 mark. I forgot what the jasmine. Okay, I could definitely see that as there's definitely a sort of jasmine component to this coffee. Citrus fruit, level 5, yes. And the lemon candy, I believe that they had listed here, and the other citrus note. Very much present within this coffee, especially on this day. But what I really appreciated about the citrus components in this coffee were that they were on a sweeter side of things. So I really liked that at the level 5 mark. Couple of level 4s, cleanliness level 4, and that's what I said early in this video was that it's not quite as clean as some of the other Janson X coffees that we have reviewed. It's still very, very clean, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that it doesn't reach the same sort of highs as the first one we reviewed. I'm spacing on the number at this time, but it's still a really clean cup of coffee. It's still a Panamanian Geisha, and my best guess is it has to do with the processing method, but even then, it's still on the cleaner side of things. Finish, level 4. I would actually say on the higher side of level 4, especially on this day. This citric finish in this coffee is much more pronounced today, and this coffee isn't subtle as a lot of Geishas can be. This one right here definitely has much more pronounced characteristics to it. Sweetness level 4, yeah, that's about perfect. Right there at the level 4 mark, definitely on the sweeter side, especially pertaining to Geishas in general, as oftentimes they're sweet in a subtle manner, but this one was sweet in a very pronounced manner, so I could definitely see that there. Caramel level 3, I feel like that's a little high. It had a little bit of that kind of vintage Manhattan brown candy taste to it from time to time. So when it was there at that level 3 mark, I could definitely feel a lot more of the sweetness, but not quite as present in today's cup. Acidity level 3, that's kind of interesting because I would have expected this coffee to have a little bit more acidity, but as somebody that's not necessarily the biggest fan of acidity, I'm fine with it being at that level 3 mark. Body level 3, yeah, that's kind of interesting because I'm so used to Panamanian Geishas having a pretty light body, but here it just did have a little bit more body than I think I was expecting. It could be run through the Chemex, but correction, it could be from it being run through the V60, but yeah, just a little bit more body than I think I was expecting. But for the most part, I think I like the way that this tasting looks. I think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This one was actually my second favorite of the Janson coffees. The 600 is still my favorite, and that's because that one accentuated a lot more of the characteristics I do like from those coffees. There are positives to this one. I think the biggest positives I can say is if you really like the flavors that come from these Geisha coffees, but don't like the subtlety of them, then the more pronounced manner definitely does help. I really like those components. I like the delicacy and I like the complexity because I don't think this one was necessarily complex. It was pretty direct and straightforward, and that's a little bit counterintuitive to what you might expect from Panamanian Geishas in general. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, very much in line with what I just said. If you like the flavor of the Geisha coffees but don't like the really light body, the really delicate aspects, the really kind of soft florals, then this one feels like a really good fit for you because it had the flavor profile in a more pronounced manner, slightly more body, and while you're sacrificing a slight bit of cleanliness, it still has wonderful cleanliness to the cup. So for all of those reasons, it makes it slightly different than a lot of the previous experiences, but that's always fun because I do prefer something that has a little bit more uniqueness to it. I think for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Janson X 945 Carbonic Maceration Wash Process Panama from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.